How's it going there, everybody? Brandon here, coming to you again on the channel. So I've been working on this much larger project here, kind of a sunset scene over some distant Blue Ridge Mountains with what's going to be foreground wildflowers and an old fence running through here. So in this particular video, we'll take a look at how I'm going to create some wildflowers here in this foreground area of this painting. So let's get a look at that now. Okay, so as I mentioned here, we're going to be doing some foreground wildflowers here in this area, and all I've really done is put in a background here of just some black, brown, green. So it's just a mixture of color here that I have randomly put in place to create this kind of area. And then we're going to come in here now, create a little bit deeper shadows in some area, do some brighter foreground colors here, and hopefully we'll make that pop the way we want, get the contrast we're looking for to create some good textures and stuff that looks a lot closer to the viewer here. So I'm going to move in on this area here, which is where we're going to be concentrating. I'm going to kind of leave this little bit back here is going to be distant trees, and then so we're going to work mostly right in here now. I'm going to come in here with some black and some green mixed together. This is grass green just with ivory black, and create some darker shadows in this area. Now moving back to a 3/4 inch wash brush here, I'm going to go into my green. Now I'm using a color they call grass green, but it can be whatever green you've got, because we're going to throw a lot of black in here with it to darken it up. And we're going to come in this area here and create some shadow by just randomly touching it in, maybe even turning the brush a little bit. So just going to give something for our lighter colors to contrast against. So we're creating background shape, texture, shadow, color. Doesn't have to be anything real specific at all. Very random. Now as I get a little closer in here, closer to this fence top, I'm going to broaden my brush strokes up a little bit to create a little bigger individual shaded area, as opposed to just kind of tapping like I was a little further away, because those shapes up here are further away from us. Up front here, this stuff's a lot closer, and so partially to give that illusion, I'm going to make my shadowed shaded areas just bigger overall. Because I'm going to be putting larger flowers also in these areas. So in order for me to be able to make a bigger foreground flower, it's contrasting nicely against our background, I want my background shadowed areas to also be bigger. But I'm still just kind of randomly pushing this paint here onto the canvas, creating a variety of different textures and brush strokes. All right, I think I got a pretty good area here to work with. Now we're going to start putting in our flowers. Now I'm going to be doing a variety of flower color in here, mostly reds, purples, and yellows. I think I want a relatively large bush kind of in this area that's got red flowering on it, so I'm going to take a small 1/8 inch angled brush, and I'm just going to go into the medium red value here to start to define out exactly where my red bush is going to live. So I'm going to just start putting in a few random blobs, literally blobs of red. Different sizes here, so a couple of places I'm just going to barely touch the canvas. Tiny little red dots. Other places I'm going to put a much bigger glob of red here. And just start to figure out where and how big I want my bush to be. I think I want it to probably cover at least into about this area. And I want some of these red flowers extending up into that distant tree line. And now I'm ultimately going to have more flowers coming in front of this red one, probably extending about halfway up. So I'm going to carry this red down about halfway, somewhere in this vicinity. And right now, again, I'm just kind of getting an idea and a feel for where this is going to be, because I need to come in and add some leaf and limb and stem texture on this bush. So I'm just kind of getting an idea here of where this thing's going to live. So I think that's a good starting point. Now I'm going to go back to my liner brush and grab some of that light value that I did this little background tree with. So basically it was white with a little bit of green and black mixed in it. I'm just going to scratch in a couple of stems into this bush that we might be seeing in here. Working with acrylics, if you need to create thinner lines, one way to do it, you can thin it out just a little bit with some water. Don't get too carried away with it, make it too thin. But you can definitely thin it out with a little water so you can draw some skinnier lines in here. And some of this is going to get covered back up, so don't feel like you have to make perfect marks in here right now. I'm just randomly putting some stuff in. It's going to be part of this bush. Wherever you have some good dark shadow in here is a good place to lay these stems and limbs and twigs in, because it'll show up better, obviously, against that darker background. Now with that same liner brush, I'm going to go into my green with a little bit of white. So I've got a little lighter green value here. I'm going to start creating some just by tapping and touching the end of this liner brush in some places here. What could be leaf texture. I'm also going to put in just a tiny bit of yellow ochre with this mix, just to add a little something to it. Lighten it up a little more. And now I'm starting to create some individual bits of leaf texture in here. You can kind of push the tip of that liner brush down a little bit to create bigger bits of leaf texture. Just touch the end of it to create small bits of leaf texture. Vary it up a little bit, so a little heavier pressure on some of your marks than others. And just kind of get random with it. And we're going to start to create our first foreground bush here. So we're going to carry some of these marks on up into that background tree line there. And we're going to ultimately bring in several different passes of varying our levels of green, white, yellow in here. So just make a handful of marks with one value of your mix. And then add a little something to it. Maybe add a touch more yellow ochre into it. And make another series of marks with that value. We're just avoiding keeping everything a monotone color out here, because that's not how it would look like in nature. It's not all going to be the same shade of green or yellow or red or whatever you're working with. There's going to be some variation in it, some darker, some lighter, some stuff with more pigment, some stuff with less. So keep playing with your mix a little bit. Just keep working some leaf texture in until you get something that you are happy with the end result. Maybe you take a step back from it, look at it, come back in and fill in where you feel like you need some more leaf texture applied. And then we will finish it up with more of our actual red flower. Leave some of your stems and limbs and whatever you've got in the background visible. Don't cover everything up. And again, this is not going to be the closest flower to us. In fact, this is probably going to be the furthest bush away from us that we can start to actually see any kind of detail and texture in. So we don't want to get too carried away with it. We do want to give the indication that it is indeed back there. Now I feel pretty good about my leaf texture. I'll clean that brush off a little bit. Using that same liner brush now, I'm going to go back into my medium red value. Really start to put in some red flowering stuff here. And again, we're going to vary our red values as well. So right now I'm just putting in a straight medium red, touching it in, dotting it, splotching it. Some of this flower will be a lot thicker in some areas than in others. So just kind of randomly put it in there. And now that I've got a pretty good base back here of some red flower, I'm going to start to switch it up, some different colors of things. And this can be, you know, whatever you want, but I think I'm going to start introducing some probably yellows and oranges, things of that nature in here. And again, you don't want tons of detail back here just because this is still going to be a little bit far enough away from us that we're not going to see huge amounts of detail. But we do want to start bringing in the fact that there is something back there that has got some red flowering buds going on it. And now I'm going to basically repeat that process as I move around back here in this distant area of these flowers, because as I come forward, probably from about this line down, I'm going to have things closer, so there'll be more detail visible in the foreground. There will be maybe bigger flowers as we move forward, also helping the perspective out. But I'm going to move back into my greens for right now and see about getting just a little bit more random petal detail back here. Mixing up my darks and lights again, and this is just laying in random shapes and textures back here. Basically just taking this little angled brush and turning it, changing the angle that I'm touching the canvas with it. Creating some areas of highlight with some brighter tones of my green, darker tones back in there, creating my shadows and my shaded leaves and things that are going on. And then we can start moving into adding some flower in there. So I'm going to go into some yellow ochre right on my green mix that I've been using there. I just really went into some yellow ochre on top of it and just start to touch in again some random distant things here. Who knows what this is living back here, some form of a flower, flowering bush. Maybe it comes in here and starts to match up with that red one a little bit. That's a pretty good assortment of stuff along the back, and we're going to basically move a layer forward into this area just below it. I'm going to move back to my wash brush, it's a 3/4 inch wash brush, to start creating some foreground bushes that are going to be a little closer to us, so there's going to be more detail in here. So the first thing I'm going to do is get some lighter green values in here for leaves and whatever we've got happening. So I'm going to go into sap green, still medium yellow mixed with it to lighten things up a little bit. Just paint on the end of that brush, and I'm going to come in here and create a few larger leaf textures. Who knows what these are specifically, but it's a bigger touch of the end of this brush that's creating a larger leaf structure of some kind, as opposed to the smaller ones that we have put up here behind it. So whatever these things are here, we're seeing larger shapes and shadows here. We're starting to move a little closer to us. Now I like these guys here a lot, so I'm going to put some of these right up front and center. And how I'm going to do that is very similar to what you just saw me do there. I'm going to use the green, create a couple different passes of green with yellow mixed into it. Let's say maybe right in here. And again, it's almost like a Christmas tree type shape and structure there, as it starts small near the top. Maybe you come here and you touch the brush once or twice here, and then you spread it out a little wider on your way down. Creates that type of structure there. Maybe there's a couple of those living right in that vicinity. And maybe one right down in here. Now I can go in and take that same brush, touch right into some medium yellow, just a little bit on the end of that brush there, and come back here and do the same thing on top of my green. Touch a little bit of yellow at the top. Spread it out as you move from side to side, and again, it's just a touch on the end of it. So I'm just getting a little yellow highlight on the top of each little tap of the brush here. Now our stem structures on this are going to be more of the green variety, so I'm going to go into that brighter green that I was creating the leaf structure with there, green with a little bit of this medium yellow mixed into it with my liner brush. Put some indications in here of some kind of stems that are coming up into this. And then look into some areas where you need to fill in some dead space. You know, like maybe all this area back in here, I've just got a lot of dark going on right now. Maybe we need to put something in there to liven it up a little bit. We don't know what's back there, but maybe I'm going to go back into my blues that I was dealing with over here with my liner brush in this instance, because they're going to be a little bit further away than these, so my marks back here won't be quite as big. But we can still have whatever this type of flower is, it's a little closer to us there. Maybe it's growing back here. Slightly smaller marks because I'm using my liner brush instead of the larger one that we had up top. And that allows us to create something that's hopefully going to look like it is further away from us. I'm going to start at the top of where these flowers are going to be living with the most paint on my brush up at the top. Work my way further down as the brush is losing paint. So down here below where it'll be a little bit more shaded probably, the marks aren't as noticeable. Now maybe back in here where it was going a little further away, we might need a few bits of highlights here and there to break up some of that monotone. So back here in the distance, I'm going to bring in my yellow again here where I've got that yellow ochre way off in the distance, and maybe I'll touch in a few tiny little highlights here and there just to break that up slightly. Again, further away, we don't want as much highlight or detail, but something that we can do just to make it a little more interesting back there in the distance. Right in here, we've got some red going on. We'll go into a touch of red and maybe a little bit of that medium yellow value to brighten our red up just a tad bit. And we'll come in there and just a few little areas that are a little different value than what we had. Again, breaking up the just monotone color that was back there. It adds a little something to it. All right. Now I want to come in here in this area, which this is going to be fence and a fence post right up here close to us. I'm going to come in here. The angle we're kind of looking down at some stuff that's going to be pretty close to us. There's a particular wildflower that we have on the Blue Ridge Parkway here that I see. It's a blue, like a light blue flower, 4-petaled thing. I'm going to create a few stems with some green. I'm going to start with green with just a touch of this medium yellow in here just to see what I'm getting. Some of my dark areas here, I can create some stem structure. And then areas where things are a little lighter, I have to lighten things up more. So now we have what it's going to look like some different stems coming up through here. And this flower, again, it's a 4-petaled thing that's kind of a light blue. I'm going to go to my Phthalo Blue, a little bit of white to lighten things up. And so this flower, it has 4 main petals to it. Realistically, looks something like that. I think my blue is a little bit too light, especially on the tips. Darken it up a little bit out there. It gets a lighter, almost a lighter value of the blue towards the center. So I'm going to create a wide variety of these guys in here. And come back and highlight the middles of them. They're going to be at different angles, obviously. So I'm just creating my basic shapes. Now I'm going to come back in the middle of all these. I'm going to lighten this mix up a little bit with some white. Because all of these flowers lighten up towards the middle. The tips being the darker area of the petal. So I'll put the lighter value right in the middle and spread out from there with it. Something about like that. Now I need my liner brush. We're going to go into medium yellow. Just a touch of our sap green color. Come in the center of these guys. See, I think I want a little bit more green in there. And right in the middle. tap in just a little bit of that yellow with a hint of green with it. And so I think I'm about finished now with that particular area of the project. Now again, I'm going to have a foreground wooden fence coming through here. There's going to be a big bush in this area. There'll be another video up of my process of finishing all that out. But for this particular video, hopefully you got an idea of how we've created a little bit of a background back here, some distant wildflower growth. We move forward a little bit more detail, a little bigger shapes in here, and then coming here closer to us even still, we can make out individual flowers in here. So we're trying again to create that illusion of things closer to us, easier to see detail, bigger shapes, bigger structure, stuff further away, not as much detail, and then way back in here we start to lose our color saturation, we can't see as much. So hopefully it gave you an idea of my process of how I create a wildflower scene here on a much larger painting. Till next time, you guys, happy painting, everybody.